note of. We'll meet city-states again when we are looking at other civilization. So note in your notes that in cities, the people in Mesopotamia lived in city-states. And Europe are examples of a city-state. Again, if we read the Bible as a history book, we'll see that Abraham came from the land of Ur. Abraham came from the land of Ur. Ur. And if you read the book of Genesis, you'll see it. So these states control the surrounding countryside politically and economically. So city-states were the basic political unit of the Sumerian civilization. This is here, this is Sumer. This is this is Uruk. And they formed their city-states. And they were the first to control Mesopotamia. We talk about government, right? Over time, the Akkadians will take over from the Sumerians, right? They live north of the Sumerian city-states in Akkad. Another city-state is called Akkad. And the people who live there were called Akkadians, right? And the leader of the Akkadians was Sargon. Sargon he conquered Sumerian city-states and set up the world's first empire. So here we have a king. So under government, you could put on names like King Sargon. He set up the world's first empire. In other words, what's an empire? An empire means that I am leaving my home base and I'm going to conquer other places. And I'm going to build an empire. When I conquer other places, I'm going to conquer peoples. We speak about religion, right? In the Sumerians, this is what they built. This is called a zuggurat. These are pictures of zuggurats. They worship in zuggurats. They practice polytheism. So the belief and worship in many gods and goddesses, it's called polytheism. So the Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, they were polytheistic people. They did not believe in that there was one God. They believed that there were several gods and goddesses. So again, religion, society and religion. There were three classes. This is what we call social hierarchy. Social hierarchy. Here you have nobles, which include the royal family, the royal officials, priests and their families. This is what we call the ruling class. And then we have commoners, people who, like farmers, merchants, fishermen, and craftspeople, they are called commoners. If you go back to the first lesson, you'll see there's a list of names and jobs that people did. They are called commoners. And below, we have slaves. And as I mentioned to you, you can write this down. In Mesopotamia, there were two types of slaves. Debtor slaves, D-E-B-T-O-R, and chattel slaves. There were two types of slaves, debtor and chattel. So slavery, notice here, slavery is not new. Slavery is an ancient institution. When you conquer other people, you turn them into slaves. Part of their religion, they believe that the gods with destructive supernatural forces. In other words, anything that happened when the Euphrates flooded or the Tigris flooded, they blamed it on the gods. When women couldn't make children, they blame it on the goddesses, right? So because they felt that the environment was very harsh, and the gods and them brought famine, brought death, and brought distinction. So that was their belief. Again, this is a part of social hierarchy. The priests and priestesses were important figures politically as well as religiously. The ruling power passed from the hands of kings who traced their authority back to the gods. So the ruling power, the king. So King Sargon was a ruling power, and we'll meet more kings. In Mesopotamia, and when I say like the Egyptians, we'll come to Egypt. We'll talk about Egypt today also. The Mesopotamians were, right, that's where they're polytheistic. And from that, this word they could get polytheism. Polytheism means the belief in many gods and goddesses. And we see here that they worship over 3,000 gods. And these were found archaeology and anthropology sister disciplines to history. As historians, we studied it also. We look at some anthropology and we look at some archaeology. Right? In some universities, you can get a doctorate in archaeology. In some universities, you can get a PhD in anthropology. We talk about in one of the characteristics here, remember I talk about trade, which is trade and commerce. So trade and commerce is called the economy. What type of economy existed in ancient Mesopotamia? It was based on agriculture, but they also manufactured metalwork, and they used wheat and traded it for things that they did not have. And they also invented the wheel. These are all drawings of wheels. You see it is made of wood, and over the sea, it started off like this, and then it will develop. And today we have wheels made of iron, rubber, etc. So we know that the society was strictly agricultural. They practiced agriculture. Why? Because they were able to develop irrigation. Right? Irrigation. They used careful farming methods, and they were able to have large food supplies and trade. So what were the contributions of the Sumerian civil society? These are some of the contributions. On the characteristic, we talk about writing. And this is the writing. The writing in this was developed by the Sumerians and practiced all over Mesopotamia, was called cuneiform. Cuneiform. And this is the stylus. This is what they used to do the writing. And they wrote it on reed. In those days, they took reed, which is a type of leaf, and they dried it, and then it hardened it, and they used it to write. What was cuneiform used for? It kept records, it kept their history, their teachings, their laws, births and deaths, accounting. Who were the people that performed cuneiform? They were called scribes. And we meet scribes when they are in ancient Egypt. Scribes. And where did the scribes come from? They did not come from the commoners class or from slaves. They came from the upper class. So this function was only reserved for boys in the upper class. Again, on the characteristics, we talk about literature, right? Literature. And here we see that in Mesopotamia, the literature was called the Epic of Gilgamesh. In fact, this is a book. This is a book by itself. And I can show you something. We could find it if you want to know about it. And this is it here on Amazon, the Epic of Gilgamesh. You could get it for $5, $7. And this is a New English version. You can get it for what, $2, the Epic of Gilgamesh. So in some schools, if this was a history class, pure history class, I would have you reading the Epic of, probably reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, it tells the story of a king he is in search of immortality. And it also tells the story of the flood. They talk about the flood just as the Bible talks about the flood. We also said one of the characteristics of a civilization is technology, right? And this is what they did. In terms of technology, they developed the wagon wheel. They used mathematics and invented a number system based on 60. They made advances in applying geometry to engineering. So are there engineers in the class? Who are the engineering majors here? Say, anyone doing engineering?
I am.
All right. Do you know geometry?
Yeah, I know some.
All right. So, well, sometimes it is not. Yes, when I went to high school, geometry was taught separately from arithmetic and algebra. It was a separate branch. And so you had two things you had to study, geometry and trigonometry. And if you know geometry and trigonometry, then you know it will help you in your engineering skills. They also gave the world astronomy. So this was they innovated, they had their technologies. And these are some other contributions. The sundial, potter's wheel. They were the first to make bronze out of copper and tin. So again, we can place this here. What was your contribution to global history? So you can document the contribution to global history. Another group that ruled Mesopotamia, we talk about the Akkadians. And here we see King Hammurabi, another king, King Hammurabi of Babylon. So Babylon is another city-state south of Akkad. So Hammurabi established a new empire over much of both Akkad and Sumer called Babylon. Babylon. So here we see Sumerians, Akkadians, now we see in Babylonians. So one of the things that Hammurabi did, he developed laws known as the Code of Hammurabi. And it calls for harsh punishment against criminals. The principle of retaliation, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This was the foundation of law in the ancient world. Eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. So again, if we go back here, laws. So you can document here in ancient Mesopotamia the Code of Hammurabi. And this was the law. The law punished public officials who failed in their duties or were corrupt. So if you are a public official is one who works for the government. If they were corrupt or failed in their duties, they were punished. They also had consumer protection. Right? For instance, a builder built a building for you and the building collapsed and killed any person other than a slave, the builder was executed. Now, if there's no person in the building but only slaves, then he would not be executed. But if there are other people, he would be executed. And then in addition to that, had to pay damages to the people injured. So this is part of the law. Part of the law dealt with family. There's a code on the family. And part of that code was that there was arranged marriages. In other words, a girl couldn't see a boy and say, I want to marry to him. No, your parents had to arrange the marriage, and the one who will do the arranging is the father. Parents will consult, parents arrange the marriages, and the bride and groom have to sign a contract to be officially married. Mesopotamia was based on what we call a patriarchal society. What does that mean? Anyone? What is a patriarchal society?
Meaning the father's in charge?
Huh? I'm not hearing you.
That men are in charge?
Right. Men are in charge. Great. Men are in charge. So it was male dominated. Women had fewer privileges and rights than men. The code enforced obedience of children to parents. For example, a father could cut off the hand of a son who had hit him. How many of you would have loved to live in Mesopotamia? As a boy, some boys hit their fathers. They fight with their fathers in our world today, but in Mesopotamia, yeah, you did it, but there's a penalty. Your hand was cut off. So far we have seen three groups of people who ruled Mesopotamia: the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and now we are coming to the Assyrians. That's another group that ruled in Mesopotamia, the Assyrians. The Assyrians of the upper Tigris River. They built an empire, the upper Tigris River. So this is the Tigris River here. This is the upper Tigris River. So this place is Nineveh. All this is a big city that they developed. And the Assyrians conquered all this region here. They went into Jerusalem, Tyre, Bablos, as all this region here they controlled. We saw government. Again, there was a king who had absolute power. The society was well ordered, and they developed an efficient communication system. Remember, we are dealing with empire. So there was a network of posts with horses carrying messages that took only 1 week to reach anywhere in the empire. So they were well organized. The question, why were the Assyrians so successful at conquering others? Why? They glorified the military and were known for their military prowess. So again, military, that's a feature of a civilization. Before the Roman Empire, the most powerful army in the world or before the Persians even, one of the most dreadful army in the world was the Assyrian army. And this is what made them powerful. Their military power came from using iron and a large, well-disciplined army of infantry, cavalry, and archers, often on chariots. They also used terror to subdue other people. They were known for committing atrocities on their captives. When you were captured by the Assyrians, they would torture you, cut your head off, and dismember you. One of the things that they practiced was putting a city-state under siege. What is a siege? A siege meant nothing could come in and nothing could leave. So they will put you under siege, surround the city, and they will starve you for months before they enter and conquer you. So again, they were polytheistics. Women were confined in secluded quarters. Education, again, another feature of a civilization. In Mesopotamia, the Assyrians created one of the world's largest libraries in Nineveh.